The worst person in your office at their job is also the most confident. And the science says they genuinely cannot see the difference. Not arrogance, not ego. A structural flaw in how the brain works that makes incompetent people physically incapable of measuring their own incompetence. And here's the part that should actually scare you. There's one finding from the original study that Dunning almost didn't publish. A finding that doesn't just describe other people. We'll get to it. But not yet. First, a man named MacArthur Wheeler. In broad daylight on January 6, 1995, Wheeler walked into two Pittsburgh banks and robbed them. No mask, no disguise. He smiled directly into the security cameras. When detectives arrested him that same evening and showed him the footage, Wheeler stared at the screen. "But I wore the juice," he said. He wasn't joking. Wheeler had read somewhere that lemon juice works as invisible ink. He decided, without any test, without any doubt, that rubbing it on his face would make him invisible to cameras. He was completely, absolutely wrong, and he had no idea. That story reached a psychologist at Cornell University named David Dunning, and it made him ask a question nobody had ever formally studied. What if the same gap in knowledge that causes the mistake also prevents the person from seeing they made one? That question launched one of the most replicated studies in modern psychology, and the answer was yes. Catastrophically yes. In 1999, Dunning and his graduate student Justin Kruger ran 4 experiments at Cornell. They tested ordinary students, not people with disorders, not criminals, on logical reasoning, grammar, and humor, skills with objective right answers. Then they asked every student, "How do you think you performed?" The students who scored in the bottom 25% estimated they had performed in the top 38%, not the middle, the top. The gap between what they scored and what they believed they scored, it was enormous, and they couldn't feel it at all. Dunning named what he found the double burden of incompetence. You lack the skill, and the very same lack of skill prevents you from knowing you lack it. Here's where it gets darker, because the effect doesn't stop at the bottom. The students who scored in the top 25%, the genuinely best performers, consistently underestimated themselves. They thought they were pretty good, not great. They hedged. They said things like, "I think I did okay." Think about that. The most competent people in the room were the least certain, and the least competent were the most loud. Picture yourself in a meeting. 2 people give opinions on the same problem. One says, "I'm not certain, but my read is..." And the other cuts in with complete conviction. No hesitation, no qualifiers. Who sounds more credible? Who gets followed? This is the mechanism. Incompetence doesn't announce itself. It walks in confident and talks in certainties, and the brain around it, your brain, reads confidence as competence. Stay with me, because this is where it stops being about other people. Researchers who study this for the decade after Dunning's paper started calling one specific part of the curve Mount Stupid. You learn a little about something, just enough to feel like you understand it, and you spike. You feel more confident than you've ever felt about that subject. You've been on Mount Stupid. So have I. Everyone has. The moment you learned enough about nutrition to tell other people what to eat, the moment you read 2 articles about economics and formed a strong opinion on fiscal policy, the moment you watched 1 documentary and felt like you had the whole picture, that feeling, that particular clarity, that's the peak, and it doesn't last. Researchers call what comes after the valley of despair, the point where you've learned enough to realize how much you don't know. Most people stop learning before they reach it, because reaching it feels like going backward. The people who push through the valley are the ones who become genuinely good at something, and those people, almost without exception, become more careful, more hesitant, more honest about what they don't know. Now here's the finding. Dunning almost didn't include in the paper, the one that changes everything. When they went back and taught the bottom-performing students the skills they'd been tested on, and when they closed the knowledge gap, the students didn't just get better at the task, they got better at seeing themselves. The moment they became more competent, they could finally perceive how wrong they'd been. The gap became visible to them, for the first time. Which means right now, in the areas where you feel most certain, you may be incapable of seeing the gap. Not because you're foolish, because that's how the brain works before you know enough. Think about the last time you were absolutely certain about something, certain enough to say it out loud in a room, certain enough that someone pushed back and you didn't move. Were you at the top of the curve, with real hard-won knowledge? Or were you on Mount Stupid, mistaking the view for the summit? You cannot answer that question from inside it, and neither could MacArthur Wheeler. Standing in a police station, staring at his own face on a screen, still not quite understanding what had gone wrong. If this made you uncomfortable, good. It should. Subscribe. The next video is about something else your brain does behind your back, and it's worse.